Cyber Monday is this weekend.
Oh, that's
Find
right.
a good Black Friday deal.
That's good. That's awesome.
She was like, I was checking like every hour. I was like, oh, you didn't have to do that much. But, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That's great. Oh, man.
Well, hello and welcome back to our midweek mashup. This is our opportunity for our folks online to catch up with our pastors in person. Welcome back after a couple weeks, Pastor Eric Hayes.
Yeah, it's good to be
We are here back in the studio.
Yes.
We took a couple of weeks off here so that we could set up to record an online-only New Year's gathering.
Yeah.
And so that's really exciting.
Yeah.
I have a ton of editing to do. So I have my work cut out for me in the month of December.
Yeah.
But tune in online January 1st, and it'll be online only. So
it's cool.
we have a lot to catch up on.
Yeah.
We had our Soul Care series that ended, and we had 2 messages of our Advent series.
Right.
But since we're officially in the Christmas season, I have to ask, eggnog or no eggnog?
Okay, I'm going to be honest here and say I've only had eggnog twice in my life.
Wow. Okay.
And one of them was yesterday.
Wow.
Yes. And so the first time I had it, it was not good, but it was not because it was eggnog, but because the kind of eggnog it was. It was it was like somebody trying a healthy version of eggnog, which is like, that's kind of opposite the point.
Defeats the
right?
purpose.
It's, and it was like, meh. But I had some yesterday, and it was just like, random store-bought eggnog, and it was really, really good. But I just don't think I could have more than like a small little bit of it. It's just very rich and sweet, and I'm not a huge sweets guy. But all I wanted to do was just pour some into some coffee, and that sounded amazing. So I don't know if that's a thing people do, because I'm not an eggnog.
I've done like
aficionado.
eggnog creamer before.
Okay.
I've never done straight eggnog.
Okay. But that seems like it would blend really well.
Yeah.
And I typically drink just black coffee, but sometimes a little something in there is not nice. Nice change of pace. Yeah.
My family, we cut our eggnog with milk.
Okay.
And so that
I can see that being really good too.
Makes the consistency a little easier and cuts down on the nogginess a little bit. Yeah. Well, hey, as we moved from November into December, we finished our Soul Care series on Thanksgiving, very timely. Now we're moving into Advent.
Yes.
What is Advent?
Yeah. Advent means arrival, which I love. And so, not an alien type of movie arrival, more of this is this season where we celebrate God's arrival, that Jesus came here to be amongst us. And so Advent is you'll find very kind of specific and somewhat elaborate observations of Advent in more traditionally liturgical churches. So your Roman Catholic, Anglican, Lutheran, more high churches, sometimes the words that are used. We would be more considered low church because we're more casual and
closer to sea level.
Yeah, and so one of the things that I love about Advent, and a lot of times people miss out on it because it feels too Catholic. So if you're a Protestant, you're protesting something, right? And but the problem with that is that there's richness that gets thrown out with some of the things that maybe there's a protest against, right? And so one of the things that ancient Christians were much better at than we are today, that is, I think, really healthy, is the ideas of rhythms and rituals. Those things can turn into empty things, but they, if they are kept with Jesus at the center of them, they can be very enriching. They can be very provoking spiritually in some healthy ways. There's something about the familiar routine of observing the church calendar that builds upon itself each year, as opposed to trying to have a wow experience all the time. There's something very healthy for discipleship to practice the same things over and over and build upon a foundation. That's what I love about the Lent season. That's what I love about Advent. Is it does this great job of preparing us to see the story anew and build upon what we've learned or participated in or experienced in Christ in previous years. And so Advent is this period of 4 weeks leading up to Christmas Day, where we put ourselves in the position of the people of Israel waiting for the Messiah to come. And we're on the other side of the Messiah coming, but we're also waiting for the return of Christ, the eternal kingdom to be fully ushered in. And so we can relate very well with these people who trusted God, but we're waiting on him to act decisively in history, right? And he did, and he's going to again. And so we do that for 4 weeks, and then we celebrate Christmas. We celebrate that Jesus has come and all that means. And Christmas, I mentioned this in week 1, Christmas is not a one-day thing, and then we go back to work. Traditionally, it's a 12-day feast, and I love that. I love that. Just the idea that this is such a big deal that it is going to interrupt our lives to the point where we're in community feasting every day for 12 days. And so I'd encourage people to practice some version of that. I know that our world doesn't allow for a 12-day, let's just eat for 12 days straight and never leave our houses. But to find ways to celebrate for 12 days, that's just a super fun thing. It's not just a really cheesy Christmas song, the 12 Days of Christmas. It's it's a celebration of Jesus that is supposed to last beyond just one day. And then that culminates with Epiphany. And Epiphany is the celebration of the gospel being extended to Gentiles, as symbolized by the Magi coming and visiting Mary, Joseph, and Jesus. And that's really important. We may just scoff at that and say that's 2,000-year-old news, but up to a certain point, the belief was Jesus is for Jewish people only. He's the Jewish Messiah. And we know later that God was opening up the doors for everyone to be included, including people like you and me, Gentiles. And so that is Advent from a big picture standpoint. And I really love the structure of it that helps us to not just kind of make up our own way of celebrating Christmas. We join with 2,000 years of church history of people who have taken this very seriously and have been enriched by these rhythms and routines.
Wow, that's so good. Yeah. Man, if we were able to have a 12-day feast.
Oh, yeah.
Right? What would be the thing that you would never get sick of?
There can be all sorts of other things going on, but if it would be some sort of tortilla chips and dip. So salsa and guac and queso and anything you can dip a tortilla chip in, I can eat that pretty much for every meal, and I'd be fine.
That's so tough because you especially when you go to a restaurant and you're like, oh man, these chips are amazing. Yeah. But I don't want to get full.
Exactly.
But then you always fall for it.
Every time.
No, I do too.
Every time.
I do too. Yep. So we're 2 weeks into this Advent series. Yep. What can we kind of expect moving forward?
Yes. So the way we've structured this series is around the Advent candles, which all symbolize a gift that we receive because of Jesus' coming. And so last week we did hope. And the hope of waiting for God to act, right? And we put ourselves in the shoes of the Israelites who were waiting for this Messiah to come. And then this week was about peace and the gift of peace that comes even in the midst of turmoil. And I think that's what's hard about a message on peace is that we get a glimpse of peace, but we live in a world that's still torn up by sin. And so it's tough to define peace in any super tangible way because it doesn't seem to last if it's about circumstances. And so what kind of peace do we get from knowing Jesus? And I made the case that hopefully made the case, that's up to anybody who's listening, that it's internal, meaning that there's a peace that we have that can't be taken away by life circumstances. It's eternal. It's going to last forever because it's sure and certain because of Jesus Christ, not because I can manufacture peace, but because he has victory, and he has victory over all of the things that disrupt peace. And one day we'll experience that perfect peace. But I made the case that it is internal, but it also spills out, right? It spills out into peacemaking, and we're called to be peacemakers. And I think, honestly, I'll be a little vulnerable here. Yesterday was one of the harder sermons for me to preach because, I I take Jesus's words and actions and what that meant for the early church very seriously. When they talked about peacemaking, their ideas on nonviolence are pretty, I think, important. And so I personally take what some people think is an extreme approach, whereas I would consider myself a pacifist. And that's a hard sermon to preach in a room full of people who may or may not agree. And I don't want to just say, hey, everybody who wants to be a faithful follower like me will be a pacifist. And yet I see the scriptures so clearly calling us to be peacemakers in so many ways. I have a hard time seeing violence as a tool to bring peace, right? It doesn't add up. Now, there are all sorts of Christians who would hold to what's known as a just war theory, where there's some, C.S. Lewis, I think, did a really good job of summarizing his position on a just war theory, which is war is evil, violence is evil, but sometimes in this fallen world, it's the only thing that will stop a greater evil. Now, I don't personally subscribe to that, but I understand it and I can see a biblical case for it. The problem lies in the fact that, under that theory, and his context was World War II. Under that theory, name another just war other than World War II. And you're like, ugh, So anyway, not to get into this whole political thing or talk too much about pacifism. It was a hard sermon to preach because what I wanted to say was, our peacemaking has to be so radical in the way that Jesus's was. That violence was not an option for him, but his advocacy for peace and peacemaking made him a target from violent people, and he experienced the violence of this world in a way that that we have to, I guess, potentially be willing to accept if we're to follow after him. So I didn't get into any of that, so I'm just kind of throwing those out there as some of the stuff I was struggling with as I was trying to write a message on peace. But that's that was the tough part about yesterday's sermon, and still trying to wrestle through with what's the best way to talk about this in a group of people that have different ways of thinking about it.
As we're wrapping up here, what can we kind of expect from the rest of the Advent series?
Actually, this week I'll be leading worship, and Pastor Ty will be preaching. And we're going to keep going through Advent and giving thanks for the gifts that we received through Christ's first coming, and waiting and praying for what it's going to be like at his second coming. So we've done the hope and peace candles, and then we've got the love candle that we'll light this weekend, and we'll hear a sermon about love. And then we've got the joy candle that we'll light on Christmas Eve. And then we've got the Christ candle that we'll light on Christmas Day. And so essentially, the gift of love that we receive at Christmas, the gift of joy that we receive at Christmas, and then the gift of Christ, which is ultimately all of them are wrapped up in that we receive at Christmas.
Thank you so much for sitting down and catching up after a couple of weeks. And we're excited to talk to you after we talked with Pastor Ty. And thank you so much for joining us for our midweek mashup. If you want to hear more about our Advent series, I'll go ahead and add a banner to that. And we will see you next week.